Let's go now to Jerusalem. We'll cross live to Israel and we'll speak with a former Israeli ambassador to Australia, Mark Sofer. Well, Mark, I am really delighted to have your company on this huge day for your people and your country. What's the mood on the ground like in Jerusalem?
Well, you can see from the pictures from the hostage square and here in Jerusalem too as well, which are less on the television screens, the elation, the feeling of utter joy at the release of the hostages. One group, as you know, has already been released, and the second is already, as far as we understand, in the hands of the Red Cross. So yes, it's a day of joy, it's a day of elation. We're grappling now, of course, with the landing, the arrival of Donald Trump in Israel just about half an hour ago or so, and the release of the hostages at the same time, and the trepidation that the situation of the hostages who are being released will be hopefully physically, but not only physically, perhaps even more importantly, mentally well, and nobody really knows at this stage.
Yeah, I will just dwell for a moment on the mental anguish, because there's been 2 reports of suicide in the last couple of days, haven't there? A mother of someone who was killed in the terror attacks, unable to continue anymore, and of course, someone else who watched his partner killed, as I understand, at the Nova Festival, who took his own life. And, you know, we've got the usual information there for Lifeline or anyone else who is affected by this information. But, you know, there are all of the mental scars that we'll say with I think all Israelis, if I'm honest, Mark, not just the people involved, obviously, in this at a personal level, but with everyone in your country, long after they return to some sort of physical health. I think the mental health will be there.
I think you're 100% correct. The physical health, one way or another, will be treated in the hospitals, and hopefully all will return to good health in a physical sense. I think the trauma, the psychiatric, the psychological trauma from the hostages themselves and their families, as you mentioned so correctly. We have not only the 20 hostages, the live hostages now being released, as you can see on your screen right now, but 28 bodies will be coming back now at the same time, 27 men and one woman. And the families, of course, are in terrible, terrible anguish. They were taken alive, they were shot, they were killed. The live ones have been languishing in horrendous conditions for the last 2 years. So the trauma is not just on the people, it's not on the families themselves, it's not just on the hostages themselves, but on the entire family system. The suicide of the young man whose partner was killed in the Nova attack on the 7th of October 2023 shows just 2 years later, after he had been receiving non-stop psychiatric and psychological treatment, 2 years later he was unable to take it anymore and shot him and killed himself. And this is going to be multiplied and multiplied, and it just has to be looked at. It might take a decade, it may take whole lifetimes for so many of them.
Yes. Look, two quick questions. Of course, we've got the president who will speak at the Knesset. I'm interested in your take on his reception there, but also the people that will be released from Israeli prison. How is that being taken politically, given some of them are in there for terrible crimes?
All of them are in. I'll start with the second. All of them are in there for terrible crimes, Peta. Some of them are worse, and some of them with having killed less people, but all of them are in there for terrible crimes. And this is the price. I think there are 2 ways of looking at it. The one way is, of course, the way the government is handling it, which I'm not a fan of this government, and I've never hidden that. But the fact of the matter is the government obviously has an interest, and that's normal, I think, for any country, any government around the world, has an interest in sort of keeping that part of it as little covered as possible and discuss everything else. And that's normal, and I have no complaints about that. But of course, there are people whose loved ones have been killed by many of those who are being released right now. It's a very difficult time, but that, and I think here everybody in Israel is in agreement with everybody, and this is a consensus in a country where there is no consensus on almost anything. Everybody agrees that it is a price that had to be paid, that has to be paid to get the hostages out, and a ceasefire or the end of the war, whatever it is. As far as your first part of the question is concerned about President Trump, well, as you can see, not everybody was passionately in love with President Trump until recently. They had the differences of opinion around him. But today he is the hero. He is the person who has brought this agreement together. Everybody looks at him with great reverence. He will be received here with enormous respect and honor, not just in the Knesset, but in the public. You saw, I don't know if you saw on Australian television, Witkoff and Jared Kushner speaking at the Hostage Square the other day, where they were received with such great respect and honor. I think that's the feeling of everybody, left, right, and center here in Israel, that Trump has achieved this, that Trump has been the driving force behind it, and there's a lot of goodwill towards him here in the entire country.
I will thank you, Mark Sofer. I will leave it there. We want to stay across, obviously, what's happening in Israel, and of course, we will cross live to the Knesset when we expect the president to speak. Thank you, Mark.